This week on To The Point, talking politics. Fired federal workers speaking out and fighting back.
Who's got the power? We got the power.
I am definitely worried for the future.
The signs of protest and what happens next. Governor Newsom formally requesting nearly $40 billion in federal aid for the LA wildfires. Why it could come with conditions. What could be the fate of Medi-Cal as Congress votes on a spending bill. And Trump's 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico are about to take effect. The impact to your wallet and what it all means politically. Thank you so much for joining us on To The Point, where we are breaking down the big political headlines and their impact on us here in California. I'm Alex Bell, and we start our coverage off with the ripple effects of the federal firings that are being felt as the Trump administration now warns mass layoffs will be next. Though the total impact of firings in the federal government is not known at this point under the direction of Elon Musk, thousands of people have been laid off or placed on administrative leave. More have resigned in protest, and the matter was brought to the table in the president's first cabinet meeting on Wednesday with Elon Musk in the room.
Elon, let the cabinet speak just for a second. Is anybody unhappy with Elon? If you are, we'll throw him out of here.
Who's got the power? We got the power. What kind of power?
Federal workers are staging protests across the country. This was outside of a VA medical center in Chicago this week. In Washington, D.C., fired federal workers staged a sit-in at Senate offices. And among the cuts so far is about 1,000 National Park Service employees whose roles include cleaning and maintaining parks and education. One gesture over the weekend in Yosemite really grabbing the nation's attention. In photos going viral, an upside-down American flag hanging from Yosemite National Park's famous El Capitan rock wall near Horsetail Fall. Photographer Brittany Colt sharing these photos with ABC 10 a little more than a week after Yosemite National Park employees were fired, saying these jobs are extremely important for safety and future generations. Among those terminated at Yosemite,
Yosemite is really just the true center of the universe for climbers.
Oleg Chamara, a climber working as a custodian at the park for almost a year. He believes maintenance problems at the park will grow.
Myself and the only other custodian was terminated here for the Wawona area, so everything from South Entrance to Glacier Point. What's going to happen is no one's going to be there to pick up the trash. I mean, you'd be amazed with how many diapers I pick up off the side of the road, beer bottles, toilet paper.
Andrea Townsend was a carnivore specialist with the National Park Service.
I oversaw the research projects that were happening in Yosemite for both fishers and Sierra Nevada red fox, both of which are federally endangered carnivore species.
She's concerned about wildlife at the park.
It's a really uncertain time for those of us who care about conservation and public lands, so I am definitely worried for the future.
Worries shared by climbers and ex-employees who reportedly hung this flag 3,000 feet above the Yosemite Valley for the country to see. So how does the country feel about this? Well, in a Washington Post Ipsos poll taken last week, 34% of people surveyed say they approve of how Musk was handling his job, while 49% disapprove and 14% are not sure. There was a stark divide between Democrats and Republicans when it comes to that approval number. So I want to go ahead and bring in our political insiders now. We have Democratic strategist Roger Salazar, who has worked under the Clinton administration, as well as Governor Gray Davis joining us tonight. We also have Craig DeLuz, the Director of Communications for the California Republican Assembly. Thank you both so much for being here. It was like you never left.
It's always good to be here.
So I know we have a lot of important and serious topics to talk about tonight. I want to start with the federal worker firings, as we were just talking about. Craig, I'll start with you. Talk to me about what has been the political backlash, but also the support from some of the decisions that are coming down from DOJ lately.
You know, I think the fact that it's unpopular among such a large group of people, I think largely reflects how the media has reported it. I mean, if you have pretty much everyone in the mainstream media, the legacy media, reporting that something is bad, it's a little hard to believe that people are going to get any different of a picture. They are continuously putting stories on about people who basically have had their jobs for less than a year, because the overwhelming majority of people who've been let go are probationary or temporary employees, or basically just hireds. But these are the very same people who, when Joe Biden decided to close down the Keystone Pipeline, he told 18,000 workers, well, go learn to code. And nobody in the mainstream media reported on it. So
I do want to push back on that a little bit, because I know that there are some probationary workers. Probationary doesn't necessarily mean new. That could be people getting a job increase or a raise or a promotion as well that's probationary. So I do want to push back on that a little bit, because there are people that have also lost their jobs that have been there for a number of years as well.
Once again, while I don't disagree, part of what they need to do is because these are also oftentimes union workers. If they are not probationary, then there are certain other protections that are in place that, by the way, will make it difficult to let go or have wholesale firings or letting go of other employees. In this particular case, this is the low-hanging fruit.
And what are your thoughts, Roger?
Yeah, and I just think, again, this is going to be a huge. First of all, it's a huge a morale problem for the remaining workers that are there, because we're going to have to actually increase their workload for the jobs that they're doing. I'm also concerned again about and I talked about this before, about the haphazard way in which this is happening. Again, it seems to be very indiscriminate. The probationary issue is one that is an example of that, in that what exactly is it's not the last hired first fired. It's again, it's I don't even think the DOJ folks have defined exactly what it is that they're trying to do. And also, as an avid outdoors person, I'm also concerned about the impact that things that we saw, at the parks, where you have staff cuts at the parks, and it's going to impact the public's ability to access some of those areas that when we desperately want to keep them open.
I do want to talk about the possibility of larger economic impacts, people losing their jobs with the current state of the job market. Roger, what are your thoughts? What do you think we're going to see happen?
Well, from the perspective of the folks at the Trump administration and DOJ and Elon Musk in particular, they're very indifferent about what you do. Their whole thing is like, you go out to the private sector and find another job, like it's easy to do, in this day and age. I'm concerned about sort of the ramifications of what's going to have on neighborhoods and local economies, especially in areas that have high numbers of federal workers. It's not just in Washington, D.C. It's all around the country. So
even here in California.
Even here in California, especially.
I'll push back on that, because I thought that President Biden handed over a booming economy with record low unemployment. The reality is that the types of layoffs that are taking place right now are the same sorts of things that happen in private industry every day. It's important for people to understand that the role of the federal government is not as an employment agency. The role of the federal government, of the government in general, is to meet the needs of the people. And if it's been deemed that they're not meeting the needs, or it's not being met in an efficient way, then it's up to those who are in authority to actually make decisions that are going to make sure that that's the case.
Well, and I also think of that, again, just to go back to that point, cutting back of those staff is not necessarily going to help meet the needs of those same individuals that have needs of those services. So again, I just think we have to be a little bit more measured about it.
I do want to talk about the potential long-term impacts. I know you kind of touched on this a little bit about morale and employees that are deciding to stay. How do you think that's going to play into federal agencies needing to hire people eventually?
I think they're going to have the same. I think there's going to be opportunities that are going to be created. I think that it's important that we understand. I think it's important that we understand that, once again, the role of the federal government is, and what it is that we're looking to have them do. The reality is, DOJ has been uncovering instance after instance of resources that are being wasted. And I guarantee you, they haven't even hit the big things yet, because once we start getting into the Department of Defense, when we start getting into the entitlement programs, we're going to start to see a whole lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. And in some cases, not even necessarily that. We'll just say inefficiencies.
Yeah, and I just think that what they're uncovering so far are basically just, they're just grabbing headlines. They're trying to be sensationalistic about it. Half of the things that they've uncovered, they've had to walk back, and even Elon Musk in the Oval Office said, yeah, I make a couple of mistakes here and there when I talk about some of this stuff, but my overall point is the right one. That's not the way to run government.
Well, I do want to talk about Elon Musk and the whole ultimatum email, because the White House says that more than 1 million people responded to Musk's email last week, asking some 2 million federal workers to list 5 things they have accomplished or lose their jobs. Several of Trump's department heads told their employees not to reply, including those at the FBI, State Department, and Department of Justice. So, Craig, let me start with you. What were your immediate thoughts when you saw that ultimatum email come out?
I think it was exactly what Elon Musk said it was. It was a pulse check. Let's find out who out there is paying attention. Let's find out, to the degree that we can, find out what it is that they're doing, or in some cases, what they believe is doing something productive. As a result of that, I think we're also starting to to see what are some areas where we can have those communications, what are some areas that we can't have those communications. Yes, it looks kind of haphazard, but the point that was made was that 1 million people actually responded. But you also had a lot of people who, once again, didn't respond in many cases because they felt like, well, what's the word I'm looking for? They felt like they didn't want to have their positions questioned. In other words, how dare the government, how dare my boss or the boss ask me what I do with my time during work?
Well, I think that look, when you're going to be evaluating people's jobs, it's your immediate supervisors or their supervisors who are the ones who are going to need to evaluate you. You don't send 1 million emails to a couple of 20-year-olds sitting in Elon Musk's office to have them sift through, what are they doing, some sort of algorithmic sort of program. You can't have two 25-year-olds going through 1 million emails and figuring out what everybody's doing. It's just ridiculous.
And do you think DOJ has gone too far?
I do. I
most definitely don't. Most definitely
You guys
don't.
disagree.
We disagree.
we most definitely disagree on. And I'll give you an example. We just found out during NSA, you had NSA agents on work time utilizing work technology. Were communicating about things that were wholly and 100% inappropriate for any workplace, let alone for the NSA. Now, those are 100 plus employees who are going or now are going, have lost their jobs, that I'm sure deserve to lose their jobs.
Yeah, and I'd like to learn to dive into those a little bit further. Again, if that's an issue, then that's a supervisorial problem. That's an oversight problem, and I don't disagree. There are areas that you have redundancies and you can trim some of the fat in government, absolutely, but you don't do it the way they're doing it right now.
Another big talker this week. Budget talks. Congress, budget talks are happening right now. The Republican-controlled House passed a budget blueprint just last night. The vote, as we know, was 217 to 215, with one Republican and then all Democrats voting no. The budget includes $4.5 trillion in tax breaks and $2 trillion in spending cuts as part of Trump's campaign promises. And I also want to talk about healthcare spending, particularly spending for Medicaid. That could be on the chopping block as lawmakers look to cut over $800 billion over the decade. So there are concerns that are growing about Medi-Cal, the state's version of Medicaid. I want to bring in ABC 10's Jeannie Nguyen, who is hearing from people on both sides of the aisle tonight.
On Tuesday, the House passed the Republican budget resolution that included potentially cutting $880 billion over 10 years on health care spending, including Medicaid.
That this is costing California taxpayers $9.5 billion this year alone.
California Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley, speaking from the House floor, says this is needed since the state spends billions on providing Medi-Cal on people regardless of citizenship. Since January 2024, Californians 26 through 49 years old have been allowed to qualify for Medi-Cal regardless of their immigration status. Undocumented immigrants over 50 have already been allowed to qualify.
When you're the only state that's offering this most generous benefit, it entices people to come to your state.
A spokesperson for the California Department of Finance says Medi-Cal currently costs $9.5 billion regardless of citizenship. Now, of that, $8.4 billion is from the state's general fund, with the remaining $1.1 billion coming from federal funds. Democratic lawmakers believe if the state no longer receives the federal funds, it will have widespread impacts to those who rely on Medi-Cal.
But there is no way possible that they could make up all of that funding. And so what that means is either hospitals close, clinics close, or they drastically reduce services.
Rachel Lynn Gish with the advocacy group Health Access California says Medi-Cal services are crucial to everyone, regardless of citizenship.
We believe that all people should be able to access health care no matter where they were born. It helps not only to have healthy communities and a healthy workforce, but also just a healthy state system overall.
Health Access California, who helps provide access to affordable health care regardless of immigration status, says if the Medi-Cal cuts happen,
we will do our best to fill the places where we can, but everybody will take a hit no matter what.
In Sacramento, Jeannie Nguyen, ABC 10.
All right, Roger, I'll start with you. What happens to Medicaid from here? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, there's no question that if you take $1 billion hit to the state's Medi-Cal program, it's going to make our state less healthy. It's going to make our economy a little tougher to get through. I'm a firm believer, again, that if you don't cover some of the people in this state, they'll end up, it's not like their health problems go away. They'll end up in emergency rooms. They'll end up increasing the cost of care for everybody else. They also end up with a sicker workforce because people aren't going to get the medical attention they need, and therefore either get their coworkers sick or others sick as a result. So I agree with Rachel Gishin on this one that having coverage for everybody makes our state healthier, both in terms of health and economically.
Roger, Craig, I know that when we talked before, you said you're not necessarily seeing this as go in and cut money from Medicaid. It's a little bit different. Explain what you mean.
Well, in essence, Medicaid is under the Department of Energy and Commerce. So what's happening in this particular case is that's where the cuts are supposed to be. So the first thing you're going to look at is, overall, they want to cut that amount. Democrats have chosen, because Medicaid is there, they've chosen just focus and just talk about Medicaid. But the other thing is keep in mind that this is a budget. This is the first budget salvo. In other words, this is what the House has passed. The Senate is going to pass something, and then they're going to come together and they're going to negotiate. And you're going to probably see something that is not going to cut as far as Republicans would like, and it's probably going to cut more than Democrats are going to like. Now, in terms of how this is affecting California, I think it's important to understand, and I think Kevin Kiley made a great point. When you provide incentives for people to enter our country illegally. And California is the absolute positive worst at this. When you provide incentives, in other words, you're not just telling them, don't worry, it's okay for you to come into the country illegally, but we're going to encourage you with incentives to come into the country illegally and come to the state of California. And the taxpayers of the state of California will then foot the bill. I don't think the voters would support that.
Yeah, I think this is all sort of a little bit of a deflection as well. Again, because these cuts are going to be happening because Trump and the Republicans in Congress want to give massive tax cuts to billionaires and trillionaires. So I mean, they're going to balance their tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans on the backs of the most underprivileged.
Let's keep in mind that basically the tax cut that they're talking about is an extension of the Trump tax cuts, which, by the way, benefited people across the board who pay taxes, because that's what a tax cut is. When you can't get a tax cut if you don't pay taxes.
Well, I do want to ask you, with the budget blueprint, what do you think that vote going through, what do you think that means for the president's priorities moving forward?
Well, I think it says more about the work that both he and Mike Johnson have been able to do to try and hold Republicans together there in the House. I mean, the majority that they have there is incredibly slim. And the only person who strayed was Thomas Massie, Thomas Massie is Thomas Massie, for those of you who follow politics. He is who he is. But I think the fact that they were able to stick together is something that you haven't seen in the past. So I think that's a positive. Now, the question is, how strong is that coalition going to be in the Senate?
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest with you. This is one where I am going to agree with Craig on this. I was actually very surprised that Johnson was able to wrangle those votes in the House at the last minute. I think just 10 minutes before he got that vote, he had sent everybody home. I guess they strong-armed somebody enough to get that last vote and called everybody back in 10 minutes later and got that final vote. So it's a very precarious balance that they have there, a very precarious advantage. So I was very surprised by that he was able to do that. The Senate's a whole different story.
Craig, what do you think is the likelihood of a government shutdown happening in March?
I do not foresee a government shutdown.
You don't think it's going to happen?
I do not believe it's going to happen because Donald Trump is first and foremost concerned about, he wants to make sure that bad things don't happen on his watch to the degree that he can prevent them. He's very conscious of how it looks in terms of public relations, and he knows that every time there's a government shutdown, somehow Republicans always wind up taking the blame. So I think that he's going to definitely do what he can to make sure that that does not happen.
Well, and if that's going to be the case, he's going to have to meet the Democrats part way, because right now they don't seem to be very interested in helping Johnson or Trump out in any way, shape, or form. You hear it from the leadership among the Democrats in Congress. They're not really interested in helping them out. So if they're going to get something done and not have that shutdown, they're going to have to meet the Democrats somewhere.
All right, guys, thank you so much. I do want to talk about the LA wildfires. We know that the cleanup is continuing in the Pacific Palisades and Altadena area. People are just in the beginning stages of rebuilding. Estimated damages alone could cost between $95 billion and $164 billion, according to a UCLA study. Governor Newsom has formally requested nearly $40 billion in federal aid to help Los Angeles recover from January's devastating wildfires. In a 14-page letter sent to congressional leaders, Newsom says the money would go towards rebuilding houses, infrastructure, businesses, schools, churches, and also healthcare facilities. Republican lawmakers have previously said that they would put conditions on wildfire money. They have yet to respond to Newsom's request. We have talked about this before. Craig, I want to start with you. Do you think this aid should come with some conditions? If so, what do you think those conditions should be?
I do believe, first of all, it's important to note that overall their estimate is going to be about $250 billion to completely do the complete rebuild. The first $40 billion is largely going to go towards cleanup and preparing everything. So there's a lot more that's going to be needed and going to be requested.
That you think isn't being calculated quite yet?
I don't think it hasn't been calculated quite yet. I do believe that that there should be some requirements, and I think that actually there are folks in both the Democratic and the Republican Party who would like to see some of the regulations and things that have been put in place that opened the door for this to happen, and also have been kind of in the way of developing or building housing in the state of California. I think it gives them cover to be able to get some of those policies in place, or at least roll back some of those negative policies. And I think that's where you're going to start to see the negotiations start to take place. And that's one of the reasons why you see Newsom kind of not backpedaling, but easing up on a lot of the anti-Trump rhetoric that he used to have.
And I think that for this to happen, Newsom is going to need some of the help of those Republicans in Congress, California Republicans who are in Congress, to help him, push this through, because he can't do it on its own. Obviously, the Congress is Republican right now. He's going to need those Republican members of Congress doing some of those things, giving a little bit on CEQA, on building regulations, on those sorts of things to make things easier. It's one way in which they can sort of meet in the middle a little bit. If they're going to go for voting or for other types of programs, that's just not going to work for them. But I do see him working with House Republicans from California to try and move some of this forward.
So is that what you think some of the conversations that are happening at the Capitol right now is?
I'm imagining so. Yeah. I think that's the conversation you have to have. It's like, all right, where can we meet a little bit? California needs these resources. The House Republicans in California don't want to turn a blind eye to their own backyard. So I think there's going to be some movement there.
And keep in mind, that is what the group is going to be working on. That is not to say that you're not going to have the lone member or group of members that might say, well, we want to condition it on this.
Sure.
I'm not going to say that you won't see that. I'm saying that won't be in the end what winds up getting through.
What do you think will happen if, California doesn't get that aid?
I do not foresee that not happening.
You don't think it'll happen?
I do not see that, because it's a precursor. It shows you what happens. When there are these sorts of disasters, the federal government has traditionally almost always stepped up and always been there. I think the condition is more of a way to try and help California not be in the position again, or to make it easier or faster to rebuild, not so much to stand in the way of rebuilding Los Angeles.
Yeah, I think ultimately the federal government kicking and screaming will end up helping out their constituencies.
All right, let's talk about tariffs. There is new evidence that Americans are worried about prices on things like, of course, eggs. We've talked a lot about that. And tariffs that President Trump has promised on some foreign goods. U.S. consumer confidence dropping. The Conference Board posted the largest monthly decline in consumer confidence since August of 2021. Trump says 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico are going forward in March, with more import taxes to come. This could potentially hurt economic growth and make inflation worse. So do you think these tariffs are actually going to go into effect next week?
I do not know if they're going to go into effect next week. I do know that if they do, they're not going to last long. Like I said, something very similar was done in 2018, and by 2019, those tariffs were removed. What he's looking for is a more level playing field for the United States when it comes to working with our trade partners.
Roger, what are your
thoughts? I just thought it was interesting. Again, he talked about this week about how whoever signed the last trade deal with Canada and Mexico, it must have been a fool. He was the one who signed that last trade deal with Mexico and Canada. So sometimes it feels to me like Trump's negotiating against himself. But I think these tariffs are a negotiating tool. I think, Craig, you've talked about this before. This is his way of pushing Canada and Mexico to come back to the bargaining table and get more preferential treatment for the United States than he had in his previous deals. I think that's just another part of what he does.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What is the political move here? What do you think he's hoping to accomplish?
I think he wants to eventually get, like, for example, in the area of steel, he wants to get increase U.S. production because U.S. production is nowhere near capacity. I think he wants a better access for our dairy products and some of our other products, in particular in Canada. I think he wants a more level playing field, in particular with Mexico, because Mexico does not abide by the same worker standards or environmental standards that we do here in the United States. So I think those are the areas where I think he wants to level the playing field.
And I think as far as, you talked about the price of eggs, and he talked about it in his cabinet, meeting today. Again, he wants to continue to blame the Biden administration for as long as he possibly can. That's not going to last forever. So he's got to do something to get those prices under control. And I think this is sort of part of that attempt to do that, because again, he said he was going to lower prices on day one. That was clearly hyperbole, because that hasn't happened, and prices have gone up under his administration. So he needs to get some of that stuff done right away.
Donald Trump guilty of hyperbole?
Absolutely, it's crazy.
I love when we end the show like this, guys. Laughters and smile. That's our goal is to please here. Thank you both so much for your insight. As always, we deeply appreciate it. So thank you so much. And you already know the conversation does not end here. If you have questions or something you want our team to look into or also ask our political experts about, don't hesitate to reach out to The Point at any time. You can always email us at tothepoint@abc10.com. That does it for tonight. We'll see you next time. Hi, I'm Alex Bell. Join me weeknights at 6:30 on To The Point. Instead of just reporting on the problems, we cut through the noise and look for solutions. We're not afraid to investigate local stories. We're not afraid to include different perspectives. We're not afraid to hold those in power accountable. This is your community, and it's my community too, and we're here to make it better for everyone. Join me, Alex Bell, on To The Point, weeknights at 6:30, only on ABC 10. Hi, I'm Alex Bell. Join me weeknights at 6:30 on To The Point. Instead of just reporting on the problems, we cut through the noise and look for solutions. We're not afraid to investigate local stories. We're not afraid to include different perspectives. We're not afraid to hold those in power accountable. This is your community, and it's my community too, and we're here to make it better for everyone. Join me, Alex Bell, on To The Point.